epidemiology and fucking epidemiology and some more motherfucking epidemiology and all kinds of epidemiology and shit. It's fucking shit. Well, I just noticed on my carnivore video. Sorry, it's a little traffic noisy and shit here. Didn't pick the best vlogging location today. Shit, as you can see. But I am trying out a new on-the-gun, run-and-gun vlogging solution, which I'll talk about in another video, not this one. But needless to say, I had a channel or a blogger slash channel post a link on my page called Natural Health Blogger, and I gotta say it triggered me a little bit, and I knew it was gonna trigger me because the title was Debunking the Carnivore Diet. That's a great clickbait title. So I thought I would do a little response video since Natural Health Blogger was nice enough to try and pimp their shit out on my comment section of my carnivore video, as they probably were doing with other carnivore videos. Which I understand. It's not, a tactic I employ regularly, but I have been known to comment on a video or two here or there in a self-promotional manner such as that. Getting out of this direct lighting shit. Every once in a while you get a motherfucker that has science-based or evidence-based bullshit with which they claim to debunk what you've been doing for years and it's working for you. How's it going? You alright? Alright, you need me to call anybody, or are you good?
Pardon me?
You need me to call anybody, or are you good?
I called my wife, she's coming. I hit pretty hard though. I didn't catch anything.
Alright, well, good luck. He's bleeding. He's bleeding from his motherfucking head. And shit. Wow, that just derailed my whole train of thought. Nothing like bleeding motherfucker running around. So, my first problem with the blogger is the whole evidence-based shit-talking approach with which this person is blogging. Now, if you've been following me a while, then you know it's bullshit, all right? Epidemiology is, first of all, that's what gave us the standard American diet. This is associated with that. And we started off with cholesterol is associated with heart disease in the 7-country study. And this is associated, and that causes this, and this has been shown to have a fucking rise in that. And it's all biased, manipulated horse shit that's trying to tell you how to eat from somebody who has a fucking agenda about it. Now, you may think, oh, you're wearing your tinfoil hat now, dickhead. Well, that's not the case. Look around at who's putting these studies out. And then you look at the other studies they authored and you see a theme. And you shouldn't see a theme in science like that. You shouldn't see that. You want to know why there's a theme? Because anything that didn't agree with their point, they don't fucking publish. And then they manipulate the shit that does agree with their point in a way to make their case. Now, the whole case against red meat being associated with increased risk of heart disease, they're not testing fucking carnivores, all right? They're testing standard American dieters who eat a disproportionate amount of meat, which is a variable that changes fucking everything. I hate it when people are coming at you with this science on their side, completely ignoring all the anecdotal data, because anecdotal data can't be used for shit. Because it's anecdotal and you can't fucking do shit with anecdotal evidence. It's fucking horse shit, alright? I mean, really. It's horse shit. See, you gotta understand that anecdotal is what you pretty much are doing with epidemiology. You're just taking a bunch of anecdotal evidence, putting it in a fucking computer, running it against some fucking algorithms and saying, well, this is associated with this. In every study, and the link to this, I'm going to go through it, the article a little bit shortly. Every study that this fucking blog references is epidemiology. What's even worse is it's a plant-based epidemiology. And, you know, of course, ultimately the blogger is promoting a Mediterranean style, which is kind of more of a vegetarian style of eating, where you occasionally eat some meat or dairy products. And you're just generally more and more veg and shit. And then, to make things worse, I went and looked at the one video on their YouTube channel, and their food list breakdown, and it's all processed foods. Not to mention, they mention that they eat low-fat yogurt, which is sugar-filled horse shit. Completely not healthy. Where's all your epidemiology on the fucking problems with sugar and fructose that pretty much everybody's on board with now, including the World Health Organization, limiting you to a certain amount of sugar a day? I think it's like 28 grams, 29 grams you're allowed to have before you're fucking up. And, you know, you can't publish this stuff and not expect to get ripped apart about it in today's day and age, where everybody knows how to fucking say, hey, Google, what the fuck is going on with my nutrition? And so really, when I say do your homework, I'm not just talking about reading epidemiology studies, okay? Get out there and listen to the testimonials of people. The individual testimonials that have no self-interest whatsoever, other than they're talking shit about this diet that they're on. They're not making money at it. I fucking go through videos all the time that with like 10 subscribers and 100 views talking about their fucking diet, their progress, their pitfalls. And when you start digging through that, you start to notice the common themes. And the common theme with carnivore is that it works, all right? So when you try and debunk the carnivore diet, you're essentially telling someone who's A, tried it, whereas you probably have not. You read a study, epidemiology study somewhere, and it said that it's going to increase your risk of dying. At the same time, you've got people that have been on it 8 years, and, you know, you bring up things like vitamin C and all these other issues. When you realize that if you really put it to the test, not to mention going back and reading up on your Weston Price and, you know, the Inuit and several other hunter-gatherer cultures that live that way, and if you look into history, then you start to realize that people have been living off of this diet. And if you've even put yourself in a survival situation and you see what you eat out there, you're not eating a fucking Mediterranean-style pasta-filled fucking processed food-filled fucking shit diet, and calling it the Mediterranean diet, by the way. And you're out, you know, you're eating meat and fat and fish and whatever the fuck else you can find. That's what you're doing. So I guess what it boils down to is try shit. Don't just go to various, and I get this all. I've got it with keto. Motherfuckers were coming on when I first started keto and doing this same shit. Now keto is almost undeniably a good diet. It's not a fad diet. And to say carnivore is a fad diet would be saying that the Inuit were on a fad diet. Really? No, they were on the diet they had to be based on their environment and survival. And they survived a lot healthier than somebody on a processed food Mediterranean diet. Just saying. So I guess what it boils down to is you can't debunk diets. You know, you don't see me debunking the vegan diet like Spurge does. You know, many others. You know, I'm not here to debunk. I'm here to say try it, and you'll figure that shit out. It might take you a few years to figure out. Like, it takes vegans a bunch of years to figure out that their health starts going downhill, or they rationalize it, or they just put up with it for ethical reasons. But ultimately, I think it's pretty well known at this point that the vegan diet doesn't give you everything you need to survive. Even this blogger states that. And, you know, I know I'm ripping on you pretty hard if you're watching this and that's your health channel or whatever, your way of expressing yourself. But if you're going to open yourself up by putting in the comments and promoting your article, then I'm going to have a say in it. So, it's getting cold out. Might have to finish this in the car. So I guess what I'm trying to really hone in on here is just to settle down with the evidence-based, science-based diet shit. You know, like, I read this epidemiology study, so that's evidence. You know what? Epidemiology is not evidence. It is something to form a hypothesis on. It is not proof. It is not to be used as proof. You cannot set out with an epidemiology study and say that you've debunked the carnivore diet. You want to know why? Because you didn't do a randomized controlled trial of a true carnivore versus whatever diet you're trying to say is the right diet. In your case, the Mediterranean vegetarian diet. You just can't do that and be taken seriously. And this, especially nowadays where people are more informed than ever. They know their shit. And if they don't know their shit, it's not that hard to find the knowledge now. And you gotta take that into account. And this is the day and age where people are checking you. They're fact checking your shit. And you're gonna hear about it. I do all the time. I'm careful with my research and the things that I post, and they're kind of hard to dispute because usually I'm talking about real world experiences that not only I have gone through and done for the past 4 years, but also those of thousands of people who communicate their results with me and their mishaps and their pitfalls and all of the shit that they have to go through for their diet. That's my problem with this I'm gonna debunk shit argument that has come up every step of my journey. When I started intermittent fasting, wasn't quite popular yet. You know, this is back when Brad Pilon was talking shit. Where the fuck he went, I'll never know. But, you know, nowadays, it's fairly common, intermittent fasting. It's widely accepted. Not everywhere. There's still some detractors who are going to talk shit. But they kind of keep to themselves. They know that there's enough knowledge out there that they can't get away with debunking fasting. Keto has exploded in popularity in the past 2 years. To the point where it's on mainstream media. There's celebrities doing it. There's, you know, all kinds of shit going on. And I can now walk around in public and say I'm keto, and people know what they know what the fuck I'm talking about. I still occasionally get the, what's keto? You know, but for the most part, I've had conversations about keto. I've gone into coffee shops and say, can I have heavy cream in my coffee? And they're like, oh, you're on keto, aren't you? Oh, that's fucking great. So am I. That used to not be the case. And I used to get, early on in my channel, people come in with epidemiology. They post the links to their reference studies. And back then, I had a lot more faith in science. But if you look nowadays and you see the amount of scientists being called out for bias, for being pretty much corporate shills and only publishing things that support the products that get them the funding. And then you know, recently there was a big retraction from a Harvard scientist who was outright forging data for his studies. And when you see that kind of corruption going on, you kind of can't put a lot of stock in the already weak science of nutrition, which is based almost entirely on epidemiology. It's very difficult to do randomized controlled nutritional studies. You'd have to lock people up and feed them. Not a lot of people signing up to do that, at least not without pay, significant amount of pay, which means goes back to funding. Who's going to fund it? And turns out just average motherfuckers aren't going to fund that shit. You know, so I really, before I went through the email with you, I really wanted to go over the whole aspect of evidence-based diets and arguments with people who are practicing this, getting excellent results. How does your epidemiology study explain the results of people like Michaela Peterson, Sean Baker, fucking Amber O'Hearn? People have been on it for years, don't have vitamin deficiencies. They weren't in the greatest health necessarily. There are some Sean Baker tests that I would argue are questionable, but they probably weren't a result of him going carnivore. They were probably already fucked up before he got there. Oh, it's much warmer in here. This is fucking great. All right, so checking out Natural Health Blogger, the article that they posted on my video. And I'm going to read through it and respond and be triggered appropriately. The carnivore diet is the latest and greatest fad diet eating plant to gain popularity in health and fitness movement. And that's probably what's triggering some of these evidence-based motherfuckers. It is growing in popularity. You want to know why it's growing in popularity? It's growing in popularity because it's working for people for whatever the hell they're going on the diet to accomplish. And that was the same thing that happened with keto when everybody was bad-mouthing keto. There's no science, there's no evidence-based shit that's associated. You're going to raise your cholesterol, you're going to have a fucking grabber. There's no keto grabbers that have happened in the 4 years I've been fucking around with this. So, yeah, you're talking out your ass. You're basing science that was done on regular standard American diet type people, and you're applying that to a completely different metabolic state, first of all, than a carb burner. And that's the kind of argument that just, it has no basis in reality. I mean, it has no common sense, really. I thought it would be wise to dedicate a post to debunking this very nonsensical, dangerous, and unhealthy fad diet. First of all, not a fad diet. There are many tribes throughout history that have eaten a carnivore-style diet for their entire life and did not deal with the chronic disease that we deal with today. So there's that. But if you want to ignore millions of years of history, then let's get into it. Because guess what? Agriculture's only been around for about 10,000 years. And you know what? A lot of these chronic diseases weren't around before agriculture. We were back with the bubonic plague and the infectious diseases and all of that shit. But when it comes to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and all of those, not a lot of that going around back in the day. Very rare was heart disease. Didn't really start popping up till the ancient Egyptians adopted agriculture and they started to depict it. And you could actually go into the mummies and all of that and find examples of obesity and heart disease, which started to pop up with the advent of grain and bread. So there's that. The carnivore diet is an all-meat diet with no plant foods that are consumed, usually excessively based around red meat. Well, that's a true story. So, yeah, there's no plants. You're not supposed to eat plants. Animal-based, pretty much. But you're not limited to red meat. You can eat fish, you can eat chicken, you can eat pork, you can eat anything that came from an animal. That's generally the rule, and you'll get similar results with maybe some tweaking if you have problems with some of the dairy and so on and so forth, or some of the processed meats. Then obviously you want to take those out of your diet, and which will leave you more on a red meat based diet at that point. So many of these individuals also consume meat and animal foods in raw and undercooked states, which is another blog post in and of itself, very potentially dangerous as far as foodborne pathogens such as salmonella are concerned. You know what? For the last, I'd say 10 salmonella outbreaks that I've watched on the news, do you know where they came from? Guess what? Didn't come from motherfucking meat. Didn't come from eggs. Came from lettuce. Romaine lettuce was the last scare I saw in the news. People were having to get rid of their romaine lettuce around here, and they were throwing it away. Guess what? Your agricultural products are more likely, based on recent history, to cause salmonella poisoning, which you tend to eat your salads pretty raw. I don't see a lot of people cooking their fucking lettuce. And not a whole lot of meat things. Now, that's not to say that if you eat some rotten-ass raw meat that you aren't going to get some fucking foodborne illness. But if it's a fresh, organic cut of meat that was prepared properly, which is not something that's available to everybody, your chances of eating that raw, or in my case, very rare, and getting some foodborne illness is minimal. Now, for me, I eat my red meat, I sear the outside, and it's raw on the inside. That's how I eat it. I haven't gotten sick yet. And every time I go carnivore, I don't get illness that way. So, yeah, foodborne pathogens, guess what? You're rolling the dice whether you're a fucking vegan or a carnivore. So, irrelevant argument there. Back to debunking the so-called carnivore diet and shit. There's literally no scientific evidence to support an all-meat diet. Well, guess what? There's really no scientific evidence to support a plant-based diet if you eliminate epidemiology, all right? That's the thing. Your science is flawed. It is not an endpoint. It is not proof. It is not something that you can take an hypothesis and be like, okay, I've proven my hypothesis based on this study that's associating this with that, while ignoring variables and minimizing data and all of this other fucking crap, or playing math games. You know, where if you go from like 5 out of 10 that suffered with something, they go up to 6 out of 10, and you know, you get a 10% increase out of that, and somehow inflate the fucking numbers to tell them that even though it's only one more person getting sick based on your data, that somehow you've increased it a certain like 50% or 80% or some of these other fucking crazy things. My favorite one example of this was the study where they said bacon causes cancer, and it said it raised risk by 18%. And when you look at it, that's maybe one more person in that fucking data pool that fucking they're associating their death or cancer with bacon, while not taking into account anything else that they're eating. You see, no one's eating just bacon. No one's eating just red meat in these epidemiology studies that you are citing. And they do not control for the sugar, the grain, the carbs, the processed foods of their diet. They're just saying if you eat a standard American diet without as much red meat, then, and you put that next to a person that's eating a standard American diet with red meat, it's just pretty much saying that if you're adding that red meat into that diet, that you are increasing their risk by 18 to 20 or 30%, I think is the worst fucking epidemiology I've seen in that regard. And it's bullshit, all right? It's you're not taking into account. You don't know what else is correlating in the foods they're eating. They might be eating a lot more bread with that red meat. Turns out if you eat out a lot, you're probably going to be a little higher on the scale because of the amount of vegetable oils being used. You are just completely not taking into account all of these data points, and neither do the studies. I've read through a bunch of them, and all of them have that flaw. And it goes back to the beginning. What gave us the standard American diet and all of this chronic disease was epidemiology. So it's worthless, all right? You can do an experiment based on epidemiology, and that's kind of what I encourage, is a self-experiment, because no one's going to fund a massive experiment, a randomized controlled trial to prove all of this crap that people want to spout out as expertise. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no vegan diet proponent, and I didn't accuse you of that. I know you're a vegetarian style, but basically that's what you're preaching here. I consume a small amount of animal foods myself as part of a balanced plant-based diet, and have experimented with vegan diets in the past previously with very poor result. And so that you're a vegetarian, which that's probably the healthiest way to be plant-based, in my opinion, because you do get some of the other things you're missing out on from from meats. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the nutrient breakdown of meat and you do your homework and realize that vitamin C just wasn't measured in meat, and that you do get, even with muscle meat, a small amount of vitamin C, not to mention that your requirements for vitamin C, which competes with glucose, are proportional to the amount of glucose you're eating. Okay, and if you're eating a carnivore diet, there's hardly any glucose or carbohydrate coming into your body with which to compete with your absorption of vitamin C. And this also shows a lack of research on your part in how the body actually works with vitamin C, which is why you have 8-year carnivores that never get scurvy. It turns out the way to scurvy is paved by carbohydrates, sugar, and not getting enough vitamin C to offset the amount of glucose you have competing to get into your body. The main criticism of vegan diets is they're so restrictive nutritionally, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we got it. We know. Thus, I suspect that mixed diets, such as carnivore diet, paleo diet, so appealing as those who aren't interested in veganology or having to take supplements. Oh, that's the other thing, is you have a complete nutrient profile if you are eating a carnivore diet. You're getting all the vitamins, minerals, etc. that you're needed. You're getting the fat needed for your fat-soluble vitamins. You're not getting plant-based lectins or chemicals that come naturally from plants that can block absorption of some of these vitamins and minerals, which is another thing that you don't take into account with a plant-based diet approach. The Mediterranean diet pattern is consistently associated with good health, nutritional adequacy. Notice the word associated. That's the key word. And reduced risk. It's the other epidemiology statement. So whenever you hear it's associated or reduced risk, that ain't proof. That is just straight up epidemiology. So you're quoting epidemiology and shit. It's getting darker. You got to get away from that. You need to take into account all the other things going on in nutrition, not just epidemiology. Look at the people that do this that have no vested interest, obviously, obviously you would say that because I YouTube about this shit that I can't be relied on to do that. But if you look at the evolution of my videos, I've done variations of fasting and keto and standard American diet and a balanced approach, as you would put it, to where you're just eating clean. I was quite miserable back when I did that too, where you're just eating lean meats and you're eating your veg and hardly any fat involved in that process either, which probably is another reason that didn't work out. But I was starving all the time. I still had autoimmune problems. I still had obscene levels of depression. I had hunger issues. My metabolism was off. There was just so many things that didn't solve for me on this healthy diet. And, that's one of the things you got to take into consider is certain people have different damage to their system that can only be repaired with a therapeutic diet. And in my opinion, and I said this in my last video, the carnivore diet is a good therapeutic diet for autoimmune, for depression, for gut health, or digestional issues, because you're taking fiber and all of these things out of the picture, which I think we're going to get to a little further on in your article here. So, an all-meat-based diet would likely be lacking in many nutrients such as fiber, which is essential for healthy digestive function and maintaining the gut microbiome. Well, guess what you get a nice healthy dose of, especially if you're eating some raw products? You're getting plenty of bacteria in there. And you know what? It tends to be the right kind of bacteria. You know what happens when you get lots of fiber and you get the wrong kind of bacteria that loves that shit? you get autoimmune problems. You get leaky gut. These are things that destroy you, not to mention all the chemicals and shit in that processed food that's all over your YouTube page. You're getting those chemicals. They put the nice, healthy looking fucking green label on it to make all the vegans happy, but you're not getting, you're just getting processed food, sugar, and flour in another package. And you know what? Grain is bad. And I was looking through that video on your channel and I was just like, this is ridiculous. How are you going to tell me you're on a healthy diet and you're eating packaged processed foods? You know, whole foods are the way to go. All right. And guess what is a whole food? Meat. Straight up. Whole food. There's no ingredient list. Came from a cow. Pretty easy. No long list of chemicals and preservatives and processing going into the process. They cut the fucking meat off, they put it in the fucking case and give it to you. Now, there are processed meats, and those aren't good for you, and you shouldn't eat a lot of them. Straight up, even as a carnivore. You can fuck any diet up if you eat a lot of processed food in that diet. So, I would argue that your loose Mediterranean style diet needs some tightening up to make it a little more healthier, but maybe you don't give a shit. And that's up to you. That's up to anybody in terms of their diet. But as far as the microbiome, an argument can be made that you're not doing anything to repair leaky gut with a carnivore diet, and I agree with that. However, you are also letting die off a lot of the unhealthy gut bacteria, which feeds on fiber, which, if you have leaky gut, usually caused by grain products, will get into your bloodstream and cause autoimmune illnesses, will cause depression, will cause anxiety, will cause all of these mental health issues. And that's what the carnivore diet's really geared towards. It's not geared. You can get by with keto. You don't need to go carnivore unless you have these issues and you want them dealt with. And that was kind of the gist of that video that you posted this link on. So there's that. Let's take a look at some of the most serious health consequences of a diet pattern excessively rich in red fucking meat. High intake of red meat has been implicated, that's a new word, that's kind of a shady word, implicated in many studies for potentially increasing the risk of developing colorectal cancer. Once again, studies done on people on average everyday diets versus average everyday diets plus excessive meat consumption. Whole host of dietary variables in there that aren't taken into consideration, or personal eating habits of somebody that would eat more red meat versus somebody that eats less red meat. And you will find there are other things that they are eating more of along with that red meat and doing less of, some of which is as simple as alcohol. Turns out if you eat a lot of meat on a standard American diet, you're probably more likely to be drinking a lot of beer. See that? That more likely. It's associated with drinking lots of beers, associated with eating lots of meat when you're on the standard American diet. Guess what health problems come with alcohol? Or you like your sugary shit in your bread with your meat, or your fries fried in that vegetable oil. So every time you eat your fries, you have a big bowl of meat instead of a little itty bitty piece of meat. You know, that's what you're not taking into account when you cite these studies. And of course you go on to cite studies, you know, like one of them, here's a quote. Its conclusion, accumulated evidence of prospective epidemiological studies and their meta-analysis shows that red meat and processed meat convincingly increase CRC risk by 20 to 30%. And I'm willing to bet that if you dug in the data, you can find other things that they also did in as far as increased alongside the meat, or maybe some lifestyle choices of people that are naturally inclined to eat more meat that will give you that same result. But you know what you're only hearing about? You're only hearing about the meat. You're not hearing about the sugar. You're not hearing about the grain. You're not hearing about any of these other things, which have, some of which have detrimental, destructive effects on the body. And we aren't designed to eat at all grain. Then you'll start to see the big picture here, you know. Increased inflammation. This is my favorite of your arguments. Proponents of the carnivore and all meat diets often claim that the diet helps to lower inflammation. Well, first of all, it pretty much they can prove it's a duplicatable fact that if you're suffering from inflammation, aka you're getting these flare-ups, this swelling, this problems with your digestive system, these immune responses, all of that is related to the inflammation factor, and all of that goes away when you go carnivore for 2 to 3 weeks as quickly as I've gotten relief. There are others who've gotten relief from serious problems, joint problems, rheumatoid arthritis, all of these problems that just clear up because obviously your inflammation levels go down. And guess what? Depression is also related to inflammation. And you know what? When you lose your depression, that probably is a good indicator that it's anti-inflammatory. Bounce that off of a grain-filled diet, and I'm willing to say I'd put the carnivore diet up against a grain diet any day of the week and twice on Sunday in terms of inflammation. But what else causes inflammation? Alcohol, sugar, glyphosate's huge with the inflammation, not to mention that helps permeate your gut wall, which is all over your grain products. There's plants that you eat that naturally cause inflammation because of the plant defenses against being eaten. Fruit can cause inflammation, especially the high fructose fruits. Your body responds to things. You want to know something else causes inflammation? Stress. Stress can cause inflammation. Your inflammation markers go up. It's been measured when you're stressed. So trying to single out meat for something that's caused by just about, a ton of variables can cause inflammation, not just meat. So, and you're citing a Harvard study, and I've already pretty much disillusioned with anything coming out of Harvard these days, including a 2014 Harvard study, which reported that total red meat consumption among women for the Nurses' Health Study, so did biomarkers of inflammation. So you're saying that because during the Women's Health Study, somebody ate more meat and had a higher level of inflammation as a result, when you don't know what else they were doing in addition to that meat. I mean, there's associations that don't rule out smoking. They don't separate the smokers who are eating more meat from the more health-conscious, less meat-eating motherfuckers who probably aren't smoking either. I mean, there's some studies that are that fucked up that they don't take into account smokers versus non-smokers, or at least separate them out of the study. So, there's that. And my favorite one that you posted on here, the increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Bullshit study. That study was such horse shit. All right? Sugar, carbs, grain. Those are the causes of diabetes. Now, to be fair, you do increase your insulin when you eat red meat. Sometimes just as much as eating carbs. The difference is you're not accompanying that with a huge glucose load, so you're not chronically in that state. First of all, it drops off pretty quickly. You'll get a small spike while you're eating, and guess what that's doing? That's shunting amino acids to where they need to go. That's one of the jobs of insulin, is getting amino acids to where they gotta go, not just sugar. And then once that job's done, their insulin drops back down. They're not in a chronic high insulin state. It does not affect insulin resistance, which is the root cause of, diabetes. What you can get on a ketogenic and carnivore diet is temporary insulin resistance. That's where your body is trying to hold on to glucose because your glycogen stores are empty. So while it's trying to hold on to that, to hold on to your glucose, the cells are essentially saying, okay, we're going to use fat. I don't need glucose. Save the glucose for the brain. That's what's going on with that transient insulin resistance. And you know what? If you load up on a shit ton of glucose and you're keto adapted, you're going to feel it. You're going to have a problem because you will overwhelm your system, you'll get a decent spike of glucose in the bloodstream. It doesn't mean you're diabetic. It means that you didn't prep yourself to go from keto to the standard American diet. And it's often happens with people who have cheat days on keto. They experience uncontrolled amounts of symptoms, that you just feel like shit. And sometimes you feel like shit for a few days, and not to mention all the other problems that crop up when you break your diet that way. So I could keep tearing this apart. Let's touch on cardiovascular disease real quick. Many studies indicate that animal food-rich dietary patterns also potentially increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. I like your debunking with all of these statements like potentially associated risk. There's nothing that you've said in here that is concrete evidence that a meat-based diet is bad for you. Hence, there's no proof that your diet is better than my diet. There's no proof the vegan diet is better than carnivore. There's no proof that keto is better than vegan. There's no proof that, because we haven't proven it. The only proof is N equals 1. People who have done these diets for years and their results. And I would say that there's enough N equals 1s of successful vegans out there to make a decent argument here or there, but those vegans are rare unicorns in the vegan universe with a 50% vegan dropout rate and a lot of anecdotal evidence showing people getting poor health while being vegan, which is another reason veganism isn't going to take over despite this effort to release biased plant-based studies and the biased vegan fucking lobby of our government. In the process, it's not going to take hold because people feel like shit. And guess what? If people feel like shit or feel worse than the standard American diet in some cases, then they aren't going to fucking do it. They're going to just go back to saying, fuck it, I'll just eat the standard American diet. I felt better than anyway. It's pretty much how it is. The only way for one of these diets to hold somebody's attention is if they are feeling better, if they're getting results, which is another reason when you come to a site like mine where I've been practicing this shit for a while and I feel pretty good. I'm just dialing in some minor things at this point to my health. That, your arguments, when you come in and you throw epidemiology at me, I'm just like, fuck your epidemiology. And that's what any normal person's going to do. They're going to be like, I don't give a shit what your study says. I feel good. I'm getting the results I want. I'm going to keep doing it this way. And when you boil it down, that's where the wisdom of crowds starts to form. And then people do something, it works for them. They tell their neighbor, and then their neighbor says, well, I'm going to fucking try that. And, I got such good results with my mother going keto and reversing her type 2 diabetes situation because she was in her blood sugar of 300s. They were putting her on fucking insulin in the hospital. And you know what? She's reversed it without medication. And now she's got friends her age that are interested and are enthusiastically trying it. They're exchanging recipes. They're talking to it about it. There's texting questions back and forth. I get texts like that too. I get messages from people in my life that are trying to do this and they're falling on their ass, much like I did in the beginning, much like a lot of people do. And they send me messages saying, what about this? What about that? Oh, I had a cheat day, and I tell them not to have cheat days, at least not in the beginning, or at all if you can avoid it. But that's, neither here nor there. So, I could continue to go on. And at the bottom of the article, if you want to check out this article, I am linking to it. I'm being nice. I'm promoting your shit. So people will come and click, and maybe they'll even click an ad on your site. I don't know. But you can even see in the comments the amount of people taking a shit on what you were saying. So, yeah, that's my argument against somebody who's debunking the carnivore diet. And I think if you watch some of the debunking videos from like Happy Healthy Vegan and all of these other vegans that want to attack the diet, and I'm not lumping you in with them. You said you were a Mediterranean style plant-based, which is vegetarian pretty much. And bottom line is, if the diet's working for you, first of all, don't assume it's going to work for everybody. There's plenty of people who would try your diet, who have autoimmune illnesses, who have depression, and not see any results on those illnesses. They might lose weight. And one thing I will say the vegan diet's pretty good at is you will lose weight on a vegan diet. hands down. You're essentially starving. If you look at it, I would look at it as like a vegetable fast is what you're doing, or you're pretty much just eating vegetables and no meats and no dairy and nothing from an animal. And if you're really good about it, you're not eating processed foods. You're a whole food raw vegan, which I would lean would be the healthier vegan, though you're at risk for that foodborne illness shit. Not to mention the plant defenses that sometimes are resolved by cooking. But the fact is what is working for you, and what is working for you might not work for somebody else because they have different problems. They have different damage. They've been obese their whole life. They're diabetic already and they're looking to reverse it. And I can tell you the shit that you're throwing at them to eat would not allow a diabetic to recover. They would have to do so with medicine on your diet. Whereas the ketogenic and carnivore diets, your blood sugar is going to be stable. You will get insulin spikes on carnivore and keto, but you know what? You're not putting enough of a glucose load on there to do any damage. Your blood sugar won't rise to obscene 300-400 levels that you see in a diabetic if you're keto or carnivore. It's just a fact of life when it comes to keto and carnivore. So I hope I made some sense. I was a little triggered for this video. Also, I filmed this video on the run with my new Osmo Pocket, which I will do a review on. It's coming soon. I didn't have enough light to get it done today. But basically, I'm testing this out, and it was filmed entirely, like I can even show you. Look at this. I can pull this off my phone. And then I can turn it around. And this was filmed entirely like with this thing. I'll show it to you in another video, but you can look it up. Entirely on this fucking this DJI Osmo fucking thing. Pain in the ass. So this was filmed entirely on the DJI Osmo Pocket, and I wanted to see how it would work. So I figured not only could I be triggered and make you guys a video, because I know you're still waiting on the St. Lucia one, but I want to get this one done. So there's that. But you'll get to see a run and gun solution. The reason why I like this little setup is I can take it anywhere. I can go into stores without drawing a lot of attention. Obviously I have to be a little more stealthy with my setup there, but I can go out to restaurants and film with this thing and give you guys a better idea how to eat keto out in the world. And that's what I'm looking at, and that's why I picked up this camera, is to enhance my run and gun. It's nice, it's stable, it's flexible, and it's very pocketable and discreet, and pairs with the other thing I carry around with me all the time, my phone, which I've tried filming with in the past. And other than bringing along a big ass phone gimbal, you're not going to get stable footage that way, or good audio for that matter. Now, that being said, the audio you're probably listening to in this video what came from my phone, because I did record separate audio, but it didn't put a lapel mic or none of that shit on. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes from there. But remember, I'm not a fucking expert. I'm just a fucking asshole. Please like and subscribe for more motherfucking videos, and I'll make videos all fucking day. Or you can just trigger me and I'll maybe make a video that way. It's been known to happen. If you found this video enlightening or entertaining in any way, you can head to ScottTheTruckDriver.com and leave a tip in the virtual tip jar to let me know that you really like my shit. And the more you really like my shit, it makes me motivated to do more shit. Whereas if you don't like my shit, I don't do shit. Also, I have a weekly podcast every Friday. That's 2 hours of audio, me bitching and talking and yelling and triggered and all of the shit that you see here on this channel, only for 2 hours in a format that you can do other things with while you're listening. That's available for $5 a download on ScottTheTruckDriver.com, or you can go to Patreon.com, which we're going to have, there's some Patreon controversy brewing. So, but if it's still available for now, you can go to Patreon.com, and for $15 a month, you'll get access to all the podcasts. But I like it better when you go to ScottTheTruckDriver.com and buy them as I go. You know, that way you're not paying for something that you might not be listening to at that point either. You pay a little more that way, but you're not subscribing. You don't have to worry about every month and all of that shit. So it depends on how you want to consume shit. Or if you just want to support the channel, you can go to Patreon if you don't want to do the tip jar thing. But I would recommend the tip jar thing, especially since Patreon seems to be flaky. I lost a patron today. That's why it's on my mind. And that they're not going away. They're just saying I'm going to do it through ScottTheTruckDriver.com because Patreon's pissing me off. And I don't like it when Patreon pisses people off outside of me pissing people off. You know, it's one thing if I piss you off and you aren't a patron anymore, but for people not being patrons because Patreon's pissing people off, that might say something about Patreon's business model that might be flawed. But I'm getting off on a tangent. That's still an option if you want access to all 40 hours currently of my podcast plus podcasts as they come out. So there's that. So those are all the ways to help me continue to make YouTube videos and spend time doing so going forward. Otherwise, I got to do client work and all this other shit to fill in the gaps, which is very time intense in and of itself. Not to mention, I just started stepping up some stock photography and video as well as another income stream that's going to be probably replacing YouTube's reliance on income stream at some point. But we'll see how that goes. That could fail too. Have a nice motherfucking day and shit. Let me know what you thought of the quality of this vlog, too, because I am curious, would this get us by in times when I can't bring all my gear around? Because I can carry this motherfucker everywhere with me. I can take it with me when I'm taking a shit. I can do a shit vlog and shit.